In this video, we're going to take a look at an orange ink by Callifolio Aurora. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate it if you check out the entire video. Also down in the description is a link to the orange ink playlist, so if you want to find more, you can get your fix there. I'm an ink guy. Let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. We get no feather, no spread. We do get some shading that goes on in the stub, as well as a little bit going on in the extra fine and even hints of it in the medium. Now, the extra fine's the lightest tone on the page, with the medium being a little bit darker than that, and the stub being the same tone as the medium. Extra fine takes 8 seconds to dry, while the medium takes 12. Scrubby for both. Don't show nearly the color variation that I'm really seeing in the writing, and the smear test says you could probably recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Diplomat Arrow with a broad nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, no ghosting. No feather, no spread, no shading in the writing. Now, while the stub and the medium are the same tone, the extra fine is noticeably lighter. The extra fine takes 14 seconds to dry and the medium 21. Scrubby for both aren't really giving color variation, and we're not getting it in the writing. Now, the smear test I do not think you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this kind of light brownish tone at the very bottom. It is forming a line rather quickly and staying in place. The orange is pushing its way up, really gathering towards the top, and across the top of the orange is a yellow line. The one on the right that's allowed to dry for 10 minutes, you see that brownish line is much darker and in place there, showing that it might be a little bit more of a resistant part of this ink. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. No feather, no spread, no shade for the stub, no shade for the medium, light shading going on in the extra fine. You just have to pay attention to it, and it's definitely there. Your eye gets drawn, but it's not super obvious. The extra fine is lighter than the medium, which is the same tone as the stub. Extra fine took 9 seconds to dry, while medium took 13. Scrubby for the extra fine shows more color variation than the medium. The medium shows barely any, and it did show in the extra fine and not the medium in the writing. The smear test says you could likely recover it if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink could be expected to perform on a page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. This smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I would not use it in a note-taking situation because that lowercase h is really having quite a blowout. Now, water's lifting most of this ink, but leaving that kind of brownish tone that we were seeing in the filter paper, just not as dark. And pen flush is having some of the same difficulty, where that is bonding with the paper, but it did not bond with the pen. It only took water to get it out of the pen. So you're not going to need the 1/3 bleach solution that did completely destroy it. The next writing sample is done on P. Berger paper. This is a student grade paper, so the fact that we get some spots that are bleeding quite heavy into but not through the page is not a big deal. And if you wanted to use the back of the page, I don't see this stopping you. The ghosting doesn't look too heavy at all. None of it touched the page underneath. As far as this side, with the French rule, we have no feathering and no spreading. We do get some shading that goes on in the stub. We get very light areas of shading that show up in the extra fine. And the medium, it's not that it shades darker so much as you have a couple areas that show themselves as being a little lighter. Mostly a dark tone, just a little darker than the stub, where the extra fine's by far the lightest tone on the page. Extra fine took 3 seconds to dry and medium took 4. Scrubby for both do show a little color variation, and it does show itself in the writing. And the smear test I do not think you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Callifolio's Aurora has a viscosity of 2.35, so it's normal. The next writing sample is done on Levenger paper. No bleed, no ghost. No feather, no spread, no shading in the stub, no shading in the medium. Light spots of shading do show up in the extra fine, which is lighter than the stub or the medium. The extra fine only took 4 seconds to dry and the medium only took 6. The scrubby for both aren't showing much for color variation, and the extra fine only had a few spots of it in the writing itself. But the smear test says you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Callifolio's Aurora has an average dry time of 13 seconds, putting it right on the edge, but still normal. The last writing sample is done on Strathmore writing paper. No bleed, no ghost, no shade, but certainly tone variation. We see the extra fine is the lightest tone, where the stub is a bit darker than the extra fine. The medium is quite a bit darker than the stub. Extra fine takes 2 seconds to dry and medium takes 4. The scrubby for both do show a tiny bit of color variation, but it does not come through as shading in the writing. And the smear test, you may be able to recover if you smear while you're writing. Instead of finding inks that look like Callifolio's Aurora, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I decided to go with a blue ink by Sailor in their Storia series, Night Blue, a pigmented ink. Now, if you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Callifolio's Aurora? This is a red-leaning orange. Its tone looks cool on the page. I really do like it. It gives subtle shading throughout a lot of its writing, and there's something special about looking at this one. It's really nice, but there's a something more here. So what nib and pen give the best writing experience with this ink? I do like the shading that it puts down, and we can get some shading on some wetter pens, and I think not a wet medium or fine, but a wetter than normal flow, but just not wet, medium or fine pen is going to put down a very nice tone with great shading throughout. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to look at Sailor Kobe number 13.